My story isn't a long one, but it remains the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. I'm 39 now, and back when I was 17, I had a ghostly encounter. I'd just woken up from a dream where I was trapped in a dungeon. I was lying on my stomach, and I turned my head to look at the clock to the side of me. 3:15 a.m. As soon as I put my head back down, I felt the bed behind my head dip, as if someone had sat down. And I just knew in that moment that something was happening, and I froze. My hair was in a plait, or a braid, and it lifted up and dropped over my neck. I was literally frozen in fear. Then my bed started shaking very fast and stopped and started. It must have been a dozen times, but I wasn't counting. And then it left. I lay in that position for the next 4 or 5 hours until my sisters, who I shared a room with, woke up. Unfortunately, nobody believed me, not even my mom. I wonder if it was poltergeist activity or some kind of electrical brain activity, as they say teenage girls are most prone to this. Having said that, my friends and I used to use a Ouija board a few years earlier. I have had something similar happen to me, Aimee. I have felt the bed dip like someone has sat in it with me, so I totally understand what you may have experienced, and it is definitely scary. Thank you for sending in your story. The next one is from Jessica, and it definitely creeped me out so much I told one of my coworkers about it. It says, oop, I went too far. I always arrow down too far. Ugh, okay. I was age 10, living in a house with my dad, brother, and little sister. It was a bungalow, and my bedroom was on the back side of the house. One morning, I got up as usual and got ready for school. My little sister and my older brother went to different schools, so had to be dropped off by my dad. They all went and left me in the house alone. School was only a 3-minute walk from my home. And as I was doing my hair, almost ready to leave, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I yelled out to my dad and asked if he was back. I got no response. My heart sunk and I stayed still, listening very carefully as the footsteps got quieter. It felt as if someone was walking from the hallway, through the living room, then through the kitchen. I did not hear the sound of the back door opening, but was startled when I heard someone walking in the garden, straight towards my bedroom window. I hid out of sight and heard the steps getting quieter. And then I realized that the steps were coming back through the house towards my bedroom. I stayed still, hidden behind the door, as this was the only place in my small room to hide. It sounded like someone had turned and walked back the way that they'd came. At this point, I was so shaken up and freaked out. I ran straight through the hallway when it sounded like someone was in the back garden, and I left straight out the front door. I had no shoes on and had my school bag in hand. I was so spooked, I tripped over the grass and ended up leaving the school bag on the floor. I ran as fast as I could to school, and when I got there, my teacher asked me where my shoes were. I burst out crying and explained what had happened. They called my dad, and he went to the house and found no one there. About a week later, I saw an old man in the garden through the kitchen window. I was home alone again, so I ran to my nan's. My dad thought it was a nightmare I had, or part of my imagination, but I didn't sleep well for weeks. I never heard or saw anything in that house again. That is crazy. I just can't, what if that was somebody for real? I don't know if I would, was that a ghost? Was it a real person? Was it a robber? That was so scary. Thank you for sending it, because it definitely freaked me out. The next one is by a woman named, it was sent to me by a woman named Suzanne, and she said, I don't have a spooky story of my own, but I just read this, and I thought it was pretty freaky. Maybe you can use it. Since it involved tomatoes, and y'all know how I love tomatoes, I thought I would. So, it says, the following account is completely true, and no, there's nothing funny about it. I was on my laptop in the dining room of my row house in downtown Washington, D.C., when someone rapped at my window. There was a man there in my backyard. Now, this This is a good neighborhood, but a gritty one. Cautiously, I cracked the door. The man was maskless, so it must have been written recently. But as soon as he saw me, he stepped back a few feet, creating social distance, a move that seemed friendly. He was in his early 30s, powerfully built, and I opened the door fully. "My name is Seth," he said. "I'm a neighbor, and I see you walking your big brown dog, and sometimes a cat is with you." All true. He had established his bona fides. "My mother just died, and she loved cooking green tomatoes." He nodded towards my small tomato garden. "Could I take a tomato in her honor?" He seemed winningly earnest. I said, "You can't take a tomato. You can take 5 or 6. Just help yourself." He looked at me and back at the garden. "Can I take a whole plant?" he asked. He sensed my suspicion. It would give him pleasure to watch the tomatoes grow, he explained, cooking them up when they were large enough and green enough, the way his ma did. My garden isn't a garden so much as it is 17 big plastic pots with a plant in each. There isn't much dirt in the inner city, so I'd imported my own. His request was a little odd, but, his ma. So I invited him to choose a plant, and he did, and waddled off with it. They're pretty heavy. A couple days later, I met him in the street. He was still maskless, but this time also shirtless. He reminded me of who he was and wanted to thank me again for the tomato plants. Plants? I came back at night and took another one. Silence. He indignantly asked me to thank him for thanking me for the plants. "You stole a plant," I said. At this point, he launched into a high-pitched, high-decibel condemnation of me. It was personal and nasty. He also informed me that he owned 5 houses and that I should be compassionate and make allowances because his mother had died. I began backing away into my house, and he asked me if I had anything to tell him. He really, really wanted that thank you, and I responded that what I most wanted to tell him was to wear a mask. The next day, there were fire trucks in front of my house, and a firefighter told me that there had been an altercation involving a neighbor, and a firefighter was injured. The other end of the block was all police cars, and one of the cops told me a man had been selling scrounged goods illegally from a nearby parking lot. When he was confronted, he became violent and smashed the window of a fire truck. I looked at the assemblage of scrounged goods. Among the items, a door, clothes hangers, a broken kid's bike, and at least one big plastic flower pot. No plants inside. The officer said the man was being taken into custody. He nodded toward a police van, and from inside I heard someone screaming, "Let me go! My mother died! My mother died!" The next day, I stopped at the neighborhood convenience store where Seth had been apprehended. The proprietor, whom I knew well, told me Seth had been a nice man, a good customer, until recently, when he began to act erratically. I asked him if Seth had been released from jail yet. That's what usually happens with relatively minor crimes, and he looked at me like I was nuts. "He won't be released," he said. "Why?" I asked. "He's been charged with murder. He strangled his mother." I wanted to add a little dun-dun-dun on the end of that, but... So the next one is sent by someone I feel like is my good friend, Miss Violet, and she sent it to me just the other day, so I was very excited to get it. It says, and this one definitely creeped me out as well, because it totally could have happened to me. "When I was around 9 or 10 years old, my parents and my 2 brothers were about to leave for a quick trip to a nearby grocery store. I was sitting in our den, which was a large room at the back of the house where we had the main TV and stereo, where we all hung out pretty much of the time. The room had sliding glass doors leading to a very large fenced backyard. I'm so bad at reading other people's words. I happened to be sitting in one of the chairs next to the sliding door, watching an old rerun of either Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock. Not sure which, but a scary show either way. I was into those when I was young too, Violet. The show was just starting, so when my parents told me to turn off the TV and come with the shed. The shed blocked our view about half of the back fence line. I feel like this sounds confusing, and she had to laugh out loud. It doesn't. It makes sense to me. So, the family leaves, and I continue watching my scary show. Suddenly, it's dusk. Not dark, but getting there. I had the lights on in the den, and it caused a reflection on the screen of the sliding door, which was not locked, and the glass one was fully open as it was a warm night. I'm all caught up in my show, oblivious to anything going on around me, when I see car lights spilling in the driveway. It was my family, back from the store. They didn't come in straight away, so I assumed that they were talking to the neighbors. And finally, after my show was over, I went out to the front yard and saw a police car behind our car in the driveway. My parents told me to go back inside, and when I asked what was going on, they only repeated louder, "Go inside." After the police car left and everyone came in, they explained what had happened. It seems when my dad pulled into the driveway, the headlights revealed a very creepy guy in the backyard, moving quickly from behind the shed and toward the unlocked screen door. He was very dirty and shabbily dressed. The assumption was that he'd probably jumped off a train and climbed over our back fence. He could clearly see me, but I had no clue he was there. He was arrested for trespassing and taken away. And I often wonder what would have happened had my parents arrived even 5 minutes later. I think it is so strange how some things happen to us, and just moments later it could have been a completely different scenario, and that is one of those things that kind of haunts you and kind of sticks with you. So thank you, Violet, for sharing that with the channel. The next one is from someone called SG. I am going to assume that you're a girl, but maybe not. But you said you have a husband, so you could be a girl, or no, it says you have kids. Anyway, SG. It says, I have never shared these stories to anyone, apart from my husband, who does not believe me or in spiritual things. I also have no other family to share this, as I moved to Florida, got a new life, got married, had kids, and have no parents, as they don't want to know me, which is sad, and I want to hug you. So, anyway, it says, from the age of 3, I moved to Nottingham, England from Belfast, where I was born. From a young age, I experienced things. When I was 5 and in elementary school, my friends and I had to mind the library, as the library was beside the girls' toilet, and the girls back in 1994 had to ask permission to come in and use the toilet. Basically, me and my friend Debbie had to stay around the library waiting to let people inside. One time we both went into the toilets. Debbie went in to pee, and I was leaning against the wall with 4 sinks and faucets, and a minute later all the faucets went on full blast. Me and my friend ran out. We weren't too scared though, so the next day we did our jobs in the library, and on the way into the toilets we saw one of the children's pictures on the wall opposite. It was like a Lift the Flap book, but it was stuck to the wall. On the way to the toilet, I said to my friend, "Hold on, this little hat is off this guy's head." So I put it back on his head, and my friend and I did our business and came out. And when we came out, the hat was off the picture. We were 6 or 7 years old at the time. So I said to my friend, Debbie, "Okay, TV on the floor, and he turned to me and said, "Charmy, come here and give me a cuddle." So I did. I hope I said that right. He died soon after. I didn't know. No one told me or my cousins, which is sad. I gathered my mom's anger after that towards me was because of her grief. A few years later, we all moved back to Belfast. Grief is a tough thing. I stayed with my cousins a few weeks because our house wasn't ready, and in that time I had a dream. My granddad, Robin, who was my mom's father who had died, he was dressed in his burial suit. I had never seen it as I didn't go to the funeral. I was the age I was at the time, 11, and he turned to me and said, "Charmy," my nickname, gave me a hug. I ran to him, and when he picked me up, I was 3 again. He told me that he loves me, and I cried so much when I woke up because I knew he was saying goodbye. I have had many experiences like that with my dad in dreams, so it's kind of nice sometimes to see them and know that they're okay. But anyway, continuing. After staying with my cousins for a month and finally moving into our new home with my parents, I noticed it did not feel good. It felt like I was being watched constantly, and I was turning violent to myself, trying to strangle myself. All this started to happen after my closet door was basically ripped open with a crowbar. I was pushed out of bed in my sleep 3 times. Oh my god. One night I felt something warm tickling my arm. Absent-mindedly, I threw whatever was on my arm, and it turned out to be a mouse. Nope. After living in the house for only 2 months, my parents and I swapped houses with my sister's boyfriend who lived down the road. That house was more peaceful. I used to babysit at the house where my sister lived. On one occasion, I was getting my 3-year-old niece and her friend ready for a bath. I left her bedroom door open and her light on with her pajamas laid out on the floor. Her friend got upset while she was sitting on the top stairs waiting for me to get my niece out of the bath, so I told her to come in the bathroom. When we all went in the bathroom, I heard the front door handle turn loudly and footsteps in the hallway. Thinking it was my sister, I stood at the top of the stairs to ask her why in the world she was trying to scare the kids, but the footsteps didn't sound normal. They sounded like men's footsteps. I got scared, so I told the kids to stay in the bathroom with me. We had heard heavy footsteps climbing the stairs, and we all looked at each other, scared, when the footsteps stopped. I opened the bathroom door and saw my niece's bedroom door was now closed with the light off. You're brave. I don't think I would have opened that door. I grabbed my niece in one arm and her friend in the other, and I ran to my neighbor's house. She dismissed it all as nothing. So we went back into the house. The stairs landing light was off, and I said, "Who turned it off?" My niece and her friend was like, "We didn't do it. We can't even reach the light." It's true. I went over and the light switch was far too high to reach them. Years later, my neighbors admitted they had seen a spirit enter through their walls and walk straight through the other neighborhood wall. That's absolutely crazy. You did share some personal things at the end of this that I'm not going to share in a video, but thank you for sharing those stories with us. So, I'm going to tell you one other one, which is why my phone is nearby, which you may have just heard it go off. But, oh crap, where'd I put it? This background is so loud. Where did it? Oh, okay. So, some of you may know that I am what I would consider good friends with some of the other ASMR artists here on YouTube. I know that Rach ASMR had a spooky encounter. Well, it wasn't a ghost, but a spooky encounter while watching my Robert the Doll video, and then I felt really badly. He was said to have caused car accidents, and as she watched my video and I said the word car accidents, she saw a car accident. So no more watching my videos in your car, Rach. It is absolutely crazy to me that people listen to me in their cars. How many of you do that? Anyway, and I am really good friends with Letty from the Mystery Theory, and she shared with me a story that she experienced, and I'm going to share it with you guys because she sent it to me. she was sending it. There's a limit on messages, so she was sending it. It says, "We live in the woods, deep in the woods, where the only light you can see at night is the one you choose to turn on. It is nice and peaceful for the quiet mind. I would love that, Letty. Can I come visit? You got room for me, right? It is nice and peaceful for the quiet mind. I like to put my camera outside and record the dark night skies. If we are lucky, the garden gets illuminated with a full moon. We don't have a house yet, so we are spread between a trailer and the yurt. They are completely different experiences. The trailer is a little bit more soundproof with the insulation, and the yurt, well, it's a glorified tent, so I can hear all the animal calls and when they walk through my garden and the occasional night rain that hits hard on the canvas. I think of the yurt as a grounding place. It connects me with nature, with weather, and there's something very peaceful about a round structure. Anyway, my husband and I were sleeping in our room in the yurt last weekend, and the kids decided to do sort of a sleepover party kind of thing in the trailer. But before that, we were going to watch a movie in the yurt. I turned on the gas heater, warm up the place, get some extra blankets, and waited for the kids to join us. 30 minutes later, only my 19-year-old boy shows up and says the younger kids didn't want to watch a movie, and they were staying in the trailer. I didn't think anything of it. When we turned on the generator and saw the name of the movie, I understood. It was a horror movie, and the kind that I, Letty, is writing this, particularly hate. And I, Shannon, also hate. It was a downloaded movie from Netflix, and the name was Demonic. Spoiler alert. Good movie, good acting, terrible topic. I think demonic things truly scare me because deep inside I believe they are possible, and I just would rather not entertain that thought. Anyway, we watch the movie, my husband falls asleep, and my son and I finish it. The demon was still alive at the end. And then she says, "Did I spoil it?" Sorry, but the typical end you expect of part 2, you know. My son goes to the trailer to join my other kids. We brush our teeth, we kiss goodnight, we go to bed around 11. My husband's still sleeping. We watch movies in bed and the kids and the couches around it, so I felt bad. Around midnight, I was sleeping and I started to hear noises behind the yurt where my neighbor's woods are. Now, this is where Letty is way braver than me. The tree was brushing against the canvas. I know there are bears behind the yurt. They never get to our property, but my neighbor's property is pretty wild and has a bunch of blackberry bushes that the bears raid before going to bed in the winter. They've never messed with us. They usually run away if they see us, and that is how we like it. No kidding. A friendly bear is a dead bear around here, so we respect each other. This is their home, and now it is our home too. I don't want to wake up my husband, but I feel pretty weird about this. It has never happened before, but I bet the bear was up in that tree, or on a low branch. At 1 a.m., we wake up to this horrendous scream. It was my 19-year-old son. He was saying, "No, no, no." I get up. No time to put my shoes on. asleep, and I stayed with him because until he seemed okay, and I went back to the yurt. At 4 a.m. I hear it again. No, please, no. And you have to understand, if I heard it, my neighbors heard it too. We know quite well what is normal and what is not normal sound in this area. I ran out again barefoot. I get inside his room and he's there fighting with the blankets. I turn on the lights and try to wake him up. I open the window and cold air and rain started to get in. He finally woke up and he told me, "Mom, I felt like I was being buried alive. I asked them, please stop. I'm here, I'm not dead. Look at me," but they wouldn't listen. And she explains, when you're having a night terror, there's a part of your brain that makes you feel like whatever situation you're in, you would physically feel it. It is terrifying. When you wake up in the morning, your body aches because every single muscle was used to somehow fight the feeling. And I think that is absolutely crazy. She said that her husband blames the movie getting to her son, but she believes that that's not what it was, and I am of the same mind. I think that they definitely experienced something, and it is completely crazy. And Letty, thank you for sending that to me so that I could share it here on the channel. We had a great conversation, and I hope you got my present by now, because if you didn't, it might be too late. Anyway, so I found a couple other, I think I'm gonna do at least one spooky story from Reddit and close this video down. It's a little bit longer, and it was posted by Sapphire Lion 15 over on Reddit No Sleep, and it creeped me out, so I thought I'd creep you out. I'm gonna get a little drink first. First, I'm gonna drop things. I'm gonna get a little drink first. Hopefully I can edit out that big thump of me dropping my phone. I'm so parched. Quiet. It's so loud. Anyway, this was posted on Reddit, again by Sapphire Lion, and it is titled, "I'll Never Trick or Treat Again." And it reads like this: "I think it's finally time I write this down. It's haunted me for years, but maybe this will help me move on. I don't know if I can ever forgive myself for what happened that night. I was 15. My girlfriend, her brother, my best friend, and I had come up with the brilliant idea to stay out all night on Halloween. We had the perfect plan. My friend Art, not his real name, and I would tell our parents that we were going to spend the night at Layla and Will's, not their names. Likewise, Layla would tell her parents that she and Will would be spending the night at my house. I know, it was stupid. It's typical teenage stuff. We were confident it would work, and I wished this plan had failed. That Halloween night, we'd set out feeling like total rebels. We'd all decided on a group costume. Each of us was dressed as a DC superhero. Will had dressed as Superman, my favorite. Art was the Flash, Layla Supergirl, and I was Batgirl. We were all pumped up. We had the whole night to stuff our faces with candy, hang out, and do whatever we wanted. After we trick-or-treated for about 3 hours, people started shutting their doors. By 12, there wasn't a single light on or door open. We four were the only people out on the streets. Of course, my neighbor with the loud truck is making an appearance. And with the exception of a barking dog, no noise. Layla and I were getting bored, and I asked if we should just go home. Will refused. You're sleeping over at my house, remember, and I'm sleeping at yours. Do you want to be the one to admit to your mom that we lied? Come on, Will, Art spoke up. He'd been eating a lot of candy and had been pretty quiet for the last few minutes, likely battling a massive stomachache. This isn't as fun as you said it would be. Maybe it'd be better if we just went home and told the truth. They'll be mad, but maybe we can still have an actual sleepover. Will looked at each of us, realized he was the only one who wanted to stay out, and sighed. He looked like he was about to relent, and then he looked behind us. His face lit up like a jack-o'-lantern. "What's that?" he says excitedly, already beginning to move towards it. I turned around, and not 20 feet away was a house that I'd never seen before on our street. each one with a face frozen in agony. A gigantic spider perched in the show window, looking like it intended to make the shrub it was hovering over its next meal. Bones were scattered across the roof, as if someone had just dropped a handful of them from the sky. And for the finishing touch, a spotlight hidden among the shrubbery made the entire house glow eerie purple. Layla and I glanced at each other. How had we not seen this house earlier? Granted, we hadn't been paying that close of attention to every house we passed, but still, we had been all over town, and we'd have noticed a glowing purple house, right? I turned to ask Art, but he was as entranced as Will, and before I could blink, he was running toward the house, too. Once again, I glanced at Layla. She shrugged her shoulders as if asking what I expected from two Halloween-crazed boys. So I grabbed her hand and we ran after them. Up close, the house was even more disturbing. The scarecrows eyed us as we walked through the front gate. I tried not to gag as I passed them. Someone had certainly taken liberties to make the yard believable. These things stank like rotting pumpkins. I gripped Layla's hand a little tighter as we passed the skeletons. They must be from one of those expensive artisan websites. They sure don't look fake. We walked up the front porch, with Will shaking from excitement. Art's eyes were practically glowing, and I remember wondering, half-jokingly, if they were in some kind of trance. Will rang the doorbell, and it was the sound of a church bell, and resonated throughout the house. Trick or treat, we shouted dutifully, although Layla was practically crushing my hand. I was grateful for it. I needed to know that I wasn't the only one who found all of this unsettling. The door was practically thrown open. A gorgeous woman stood in the doorway. She had long legs, thick copper hair that stopped at her shoulders, black eyeliner, and blood-red lipstick. She was dressed in a revealing witch costume and grinned when she saw the four of us. Well, when she saw the boys. My, I didn't expect to be visited by two handsome heroes tonight. She gave a high-pitched giggle. Her voice reminded me of how ladies in the old gangster movies talked. Art smiled and thanked her, and Will was just staring at her. I took a step closer to Layla, and that's when the lady noticed us. I think she knew immediately we weren't as captivated as the boys were, not by her house or by her beauty. Sure, she was gorgeous, but she was an adult, and I was already with Layla. Her eyes glazed over as she saw us, but her smile didn't waver. I noticed then that she was holding out a bowl of candy. She slowly extended it to me. Candy, Batgirl. I wrapped both my arms around Layla and took a step backward. I could tell she wanted something and that it wasn't anything good. No thanks, we've eaten too much candy already. It wasn't a lie, we'd eaten half our candy throughout the evening. The woman's smile wavered and she blinked 3 times as if it was the last thing she was expecting. I noticed something strange about her eyes. They were kind of cloudy. She turned and offered candy to the boys. Will took a handful while Art took only 2, obviously still suffering from a stomachache. I glanced at the candy. The pieces weren't in wrappers, and it didn't look like any brand I'd ever seen. It sort of resembled malted milk balls, except bigger and lumpier. When the boys finished their candy, the woman looked at the 4 of us. You must be parched. Why don't you come in for some apple cider? She gestured to the front door, which stood gaping open like a mouth. Layla physically leaned away from the door. She wouldn't go in there for $1,000, let alone a glass of cider, and I agreed with her. I forced a smile. No, thank you. We turned and started to get down off the porch when I realized that Layla and I were alone. Will and Art were gone, and so was the woman. My heart rate tripled. They went in the house. My stomach hurt. Should we call the police? What should we say? A pretty lady with a spooky yard lured 2 boys in her house with apple cider. Even if that didn't sound crazy, we were 2 teenagers out past midnight on Halloween. Not exactly what cops would consider trustworthy. Plus, we couldn't prove that she wanted to hurt them. Still, we had to make sure they were okay. We started walking around the house, and on the left side, there weren't any windows. This made sense, though. it being a townhouse and all. The back of the house had a porch, but the windows and doors were all covered. The right side yielded the same results as the left, leaving us only one option: the show window. We maneuvered around the skeletons in the yard and went as close as we dared up to the window. I, being dressed in black and thus harder to see, decided to look in the window, while Layla, dressed in bright red and blue, made sure the lady didn't come out of the house. Before peering in, I took an uneasy glance at the giant spider. Against my better judgment, I touched it. Solid plastic. I sighed and told myself not to be so jumpy. I peered through the window. I was staring at a lit fireplace. It seemed to be the only light source in the room. It was pretty dim in there. Still, I could make out two enormous armchairs on either side of the fireplace. I could make out Art's bright red Flash costume, and I could see the blue from Will's costume. They were both slumped in the chairs as if asleep. There was a coffee table between the chairs holding two half-empty glasses of what could have only been apple cider. In the center of the room stood the lady. She was standing straight as a rod, her arms lifeless at her sides, and then with no warning, her right arm shot straight up. She held it there for a second and let it fall. A second later, she did it again with the other arm. And then I swear she started growling. As if this was a signal, Art and Will got up. I could tell their eyes were closed, but they came right over to her. She put her left index finger on Art's forehead and her right index finger on Will's forehead, and then she began to chant. All three of them suddenly began to convulse. Art went down, followed by Will. They both started to kick wildly, and then their kicks became weaker as if they were losing energy, and then they stopped. I must have made a noise. Layla told me later there were tears streaming down my face. I must have sobbed without knowing it because the lady turned around. Her eyes were completely blue with no pupils to be seen. Her mouth was hanging open, saliva the color of her eyes dripping from her lips, and then her face started to melt. I screamed. Layla screamed. I shoved myself away from the window, landed flat on my back. The wind was knocked out of me, but I was too scared to care. Layla yanked me to my feet, and we just started running. We charged through the skeletons, which I now thoroughly believe were real. We charged through the gate. I knocked over one of the scarecrows, and its head smashed to bits on the ground, revealing a human skull underneath. We ran, not knowing where we were going, not caring. We finally ended up in front of my house, where we both collapsed into each other's arms, sobbing. I told my mom everything, and at first she thought I was making up a story to get out of lying to her, but one look at our faces and she knew we were serious. She called the cops immediately. When they investigated the strange house, they made a shocking discovery. It belonged to a Mrs. Smith, not her real name, a woman in her 20s, and fit our descriptions, but she had been on vacation in Alabama with her mother for the last 2 days. They never found Art and Will. They remain missing to this day. The police don't believe her account of some life-sucking witch. They believe that a child predator drugged them and ran off with them. I don't think Layla and I ever really got over it. We broke up in 12th grade when she and her family moved away for a fresh start. A few months later, I moved too. We text now and then, but we're not as close as we used to be. Still, I'm glad I've saved her number all these years, because tonight I saw something that brought back that dramatic Halloween. A townhouse bathed in purple light, with skeletons set up in the front yard. 2 of them guard the gate, one of them dressed in a Superman costume, and the other one dressed as the Flash. That is where I will end tonight's video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I enjoyed telling you all of those stories, and I know it must seem strange to listen to your own stories, but I still hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you on Halloween. Goodbye.